Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Marley Myrianthopolous from the Midnight Callers. Marley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you say that now, Marley. You say that now.
I'll say it again at the end.
All right, I'll make sure to slip you the money. Well, I'll tell you what, you guys have got the new album out, and on this one, you guys are kind of channeling a 70s vibe.
Yeah, that's, the first album, Red Letter Glow, I think really sort of was an exploration of finding out what our sound was. And then I think for this album, it was much more of a conscious decision to move in that direction.
Yeah. Well, tell me this. Yeah, when you hear it, Step, for example, has got kind of a sweet vibe to it. Who were some of the bands that were big influences on you when you started playing bass?
So when I started playing bass, it was all James Jamerson. It was all 60s Motown. And then you get into McCartney, you get into, all of these classic rock bass players. And eventually, obviously, if you're a bass player, you're going to listen to Jaco Pastorius, you're going to listen to, all these different guys, Victor Wooten, stuff like that. But a lot of the formative bass players for me were, the early and mid 60s R&B soul guys. Jamerson, Bob Babbitt also played a lot of the Motown records. Donald Duck Dunn from Stax Volt. Those guys were all I was doing for years when I picked up bass.
Yeah. How old were you when you started playing?
That's a really interesting question because it kind of depends on where you count from. The first time I played a bass guitar, I was like 12 or 13 years old, but then I put it down and played guitar for a while, and I didn't pick bass really back up again until I was 20 or 21. Chris and I joke around a lot that he actually started out, in the early bands he played in, he was a bass player, and now he's our guitar player. And in the early bands I played in, I was a guitar player, and now I'm our bass player. So it's funny how those things just kind of work out.
Well, you never know from where you start out where you're going to wind up and what happens along the way.
Yeah,
so
it's that's been a crazy path for me in this band. When I auditioned for the band kind of already existed, and Red Letter Glow had actually already been recorded. And when I auditioned for the band, it was just kind of, I saw a post on Craigslist, seemed like they were cool guys who had some cool stuff going on. Could not possibly have imagined the route that the next few years would take. And I think they feel the same way, just with like an extra year at the beginning of that time frame.
Yeah. Tell me this, before you started playing, were you like a big music kid?
I don't really think I was. My parents played a lot of great music, and I liked it, but I wasn't the kind of voracious explorer of music that especially like Chris and Martin were. I had songs I really liked. I had music that I really enjoyed listening to, but I wasn't big into exploring different genres of music and things like that until I started playing guitar and bass.
Yeah. What were you listening to primarily before you started playing?
It was all classic rock. My parents had a wonderful record collection. They played a lot of great stuff. As a kid, you're mostly interested in new sounds.
Right.
So the first song that I can really remember hooking into and being really intrigued by is The Night Before by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. Which had all this reverb in it, and I didn't know what that was. It was a new sound. I'd never heard it before. So I remember being very like 5 or 6 years old and hearing that song and thinking, "Whoa, what?" But my father had had kind of made a cassette tape for me, right? This is before even mixed CDs were a thing. I had a cassette tape that I kind of carried with me everywhere, and the music on it was like Layla by Eric Clapton, Hazy Shade of Winter, Smooth by Santana. You know, it was this great mix. Night Train by James Brown. This wonderful mix of sort of different genres and styles, but it was all kind of centered around classic rock and soul music from the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah. Now, what was the first record you bought with your own money?
It was the very best of Booker T and the MGs, a throwback here to Donald Duck Dunn, the bass player for Stax Volt. We were at, I think, the first time that I was buying music with my own money, we were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. And I had just started getting into Booker T and the MGs, and unlike the Beatles or Elvis Costello or Bruce Springsteen, who I'd been listening to for a while, my parents didn't have any Booker T and the MGs records. And so this is before you could just go to YouTube and listen to all the music on YouTube. If you wanted to listen to the music and you weren't going to torrent it or something like that, you had to buy a CD or something like that. And there we were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I thought, I'm going to wear out this CD. And I'm pretty sure I did. I don't know if it works anymore.
As it should be.
Delightful music.
Absolutely. Now tell me this, if you've been to the Hall of Fame, have you been to the Stax Museum?
I have not. That's a bucket list item for sure.
Well, you definitely need to check that one off, because it's an amazing, wonderful place.
That would be great.
Yeah. Now, on that compilation, what's your 3 favorite tracks from Booker T and the MGs?
Green Onions has got to be number one, right? That was the reason I bought the CD. Right. I heard the song. Actually, a band that some friends of mine were in played a cover of it at a show that I went to see, and I thought, oh, what's that? I gotta whatever that song is, I have to get it. Green Onions is great. Chinese Checkers, I think, is the next song on that album, and that's a great one too. And I think is the only one of their songs that has any lyrics, which is just someone in the band shouting "Your move" at some point in the song. And then there's a really cool cover of "I've Got a Woman" on there, I think, which is also a wonderful track.
Yeah, well, you can't go wrong with any of them.
Nah, it's something about that early soul music has never let go of me, you know?
Well, yeah, what I like about Stax is the rawness of it. Whereas Motown, very polished. And I love Motown too, don't get me wrong. But there's something about that earthiness of the Stax sound that, I mean, it's like they truly captured what was going on in the studio and didn't try to overdo it production wise.
Yeah, and I'm not even really sure how much the technology existed to overdo it production wise. So there's something to be said there for how limitations become a defining feature of the art. But I agree with you. Something about the sound, the very almost sharp sound of Steve Cropper's guitar in a lot of those songs really drives home that it was just some microphones in a room. There was no overdubbing and double tracking and other stuff. It was just they set up the band, they put some microphones, and they said, "Okay, ready, set, go," and they hit the button, and that's what came out. And when we were recording this album, you know, obviously technology has progressed tremendously, but we did try and channel a little bit of that. A lot of on the new album, Rattled Humming Heart, a lot of the rhythm tracks, the drums, the bass, and the rhythm guitar were all recorded at the same time in just 2 or 3 takes. We really did not want to do, okay, we're going to do six passes of just the drums, and then we're going to go back and do 5 passes of just the bass. And we didn't want to do any of that. So it was kind of 4 on the floor for a lot of the rhythm parts for the new album, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, as I say, as we're talking about the technology and that all those great Stax records were recorded with, you guys have got a totally different world. So for you coming in, this is actually your first recordings with the band.
Yeah, this is the first album. I did some of the Gem Records Celebrates tributes in the intervening years, but my playing is not really on Red Letter Glow because they mostly recorded the album before I joined the band. So this was the first time going into the studio with them to record our own original material for me. Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
It was terrifying, you know. There's something about it because when we did Gem Records Celebrates John Lennon and Gem Records Celebrates Brian Wilson, all of those parts were recorded remotely. So I think I did something like 18 takes of the bass part for It Won't Be Long, just because I was sitting at home on my own and I could just do it over and over until I listened to it and went, yeah, that's it. That's the one. And so knowing that the rest of the band is in the studio with you and everyone's kind of listening to what you're doing live in real time, it was terrifying. But it was so fun. Chris, Martin, the guys who write most of the songs have sort of they've got like that visionary thing going where they can see or hear, I suppose, what the end product is going to be from a very early stage. And so having them come in and come to rehearsal with these kind of stems of songs already with this vision for how they were going to blossom and being able to be a part of executing that and bringing it to life and adding some of my own stuff in along with Julian, our drummer, was a really, really fun process.
Yeah. Now tell me this, as we said at the beginning, you guys were channeling that 70s kind of vibe. How many of the songs or bands that you listened to, maybe on that, mixtape that you toted around, how many of the bands from that era of your listening end up being influences on the new album?
So I'm a firm believer that basically every artist who you like and who you listen to influences your sound in some way. I think that Martin is a big sort of glam and 70s rock fan. And I think that a lot of the 70s influence in this album is the result of much more of his participation in the songwriting process. We kind of joke that in terms of the musical decades that we connect to the most, Chris brings the 50s, I bring the 60s, Martin brings the 70s, and Julian brings the 80s. And then all of those elements kind of get wrapped up into our sound. But then I think a lot of the songs from Red Letter Glow were mostly songs that Chris had kind of had lying around before the band even formed. And so Chris and Martin collaborated much more in the development of a lot of the songs on this album. And so I think that that's where a lot of the additional 70s influence comes from, is a lot of it is Martin's sort of personal songwriting taste and that being expressed through sort of his greater contribution to the writing process.
Yeah. Now tell me this. You mentioned that, they've kind of got a vision as they're doing it. From when you guys first practiced the songs to the final version that wound up, being played now, how much did any of those songs change from the original vision to the final product?
I think they change a fair amount, but they always change within sort of the original parameters of what's envisioned. I don't think that any of the songs on this album turned from like a fast song into a ballad or anything like that, if that makes sense, right? So if you take really the only real like ballad on the album, which is Maggie, it's not like someone came in with a fast rock version of it and then it turned into what it is. There were adjustments to it, there were changes to it, but they all kind of fit within the framework of the original vision for what the song is kind of going to be. So with that in mind, I would say that within that, there is a fair amount of variation, and it comes from each person in the band kind of taking their own musical influences and saying, okay, so what part in this most naturally makes sense to me? So as the bass player, for me, the bass part in Colors is an example of when they came in with that song, that was not sort of what they had in mind. And we went through a bunch of bass parts. We just kind of play these songs in rehearsal. I mess around and try different things, and at some point we all kind of stopped and said, "Okay, so what was that you did on the last song, or the last take? Because that was good, and it was not. It didn't change the song, but it was different than what the original idea for it had been."
Yeah. So you're changing the feel, basically.
Yeah, or you're changing the way you execute the feel, maybe.
Hmm.
And Julian and I talk a lot about, okay, like, what's your kick drum doing? Where are my bass hits? Are we trying to line up what we're doing? Are we trying to leave space for one another? Okay, here's where you're doing a thing and I'm just playing eighth notes. Here's where I'm doing a thing and you're just keeping a simple groove going to make space for it. All those things kind of naturally come out in the development of the songs.
Yeah. Well, talking about that, the opening track, New York Tramp.
Yeah.
Tell us about that track.
New York Tramp went through a lot of, like I said before, the vision was always kind of this up-tempo rocker, but it went through sort of a fair number of variations of how exactly we were going to make that come to life. And it had, a straight beat. It had like a bass groove that it was based on, switched to being this very cool guitar line. And the real shift was when it switched to kind of that gallop feel. And Martin, we had a rehearsal, we recorded it, we went home, we were all feeling really good about this demo, I think. And I was listening to it and practicing it at home and thinking about what I could change about it. And then Martin sends in this new demo and goes, "Okay, check this out, check this approach out." And we were like, that's it. It's such a cool sort of sound and feel to that song. It was a real thrill to be a part of creating it.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
then it was coolest song in the world in Little Steven's Underground Garage, which was obviously a tremendous honor, and we were very, very thrilled to be able to share that.
Yeah, I would think. Well, that whole the whole creative process, the development of it, when you hit on something that elevates what you've been working on, it's such a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I felt that way with New York Tramp. I also felt that way with Step. There was something about when everything in that song really clicked, and I get a lot of credit to Julian for sort of driving a lot of the feel of the song from sort of that driving verse into that huge pre-chorus. So when you have something that could be really fun and then you get there, it's such a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to me, that's one of the standout tracks. Yeah,
Step.
yeah. I mean, that's like a party waiting to happen right there.
Yeah, we have a real good time with that song. Playing that song live is a blast. A lot of the songs on this album have sort of a weird development cycle because we started writing for this album when we were still kind of in quarantine, and the songs developed through this weird, Martin or Chris uploads a file to our shared Dropbox with a rough structure and like a guitar and a scratch bass and robot drums or something like that. And then as the weeks go by, we're sort of going through and overwriting these parts and then listening to what the other person put and then overwriting a part again. And then things open up and we have all these shows and we don't have enough material to fill all the time. So we have to start playing a lot of these songs live really before they were done. And
Mhm.
so the first half of the development cycle for these songs is this very separated, sort of individualistic process of listening to what other people have done and then trying to fit in with it. And then it very abruptly switched to being a collaborative field testing process where we were walking on stage and playing the song live and trying out new things live to see how it worked. And I'm making eye contact with Julian to try and remember which version of the hits we're doing and stuff like that. So it was really something. But the process of going from Step is this song that till now has really only existed in a computer to we're playing it in front of people and it's this rock party that we're doing live now was a really abrupt but really fun transition.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, the tracks that you were playing live before you recorded, how much of the feedback from the audience to those songs helped you adjust them by the time you got to the studio?
A fair amount. There's a lot of the process of recording a song, because when you're playing live, you just kind of do things. When you're recording a song, you have to make a lot of final decisions about, okay, well, how long should this section be? How long should we wait before transitioning to this next section? Should there be two guitar solos or one guitar solo? You can't change those things anymore once you've recorded it. You can just extend a thing live if you feel like the audience is feeling it, but when you record it, that's it. That's the version of the song forever. So so a lot of what informed the making of those decisions was, does it does it feel like this song is going on too long? Does it feel like people are not really into this part? You always want your song to end before the audience wants it to.
Right.
Right. You never want
Leave
the
them wanting
audience to
more.
be right. You never want the audience to be in a place where they're ready to move on to the next song, but you haven't done it yet. That's never a good sign.
Yeah. When they
So
start doing this, oh, okay, how much longer? Then you know you're in
right.
trouble.
Yeah. So I think for us, a lot of the process of deciding sort of what the configuration of the songs would be on the record was kind of reading from the audience a little bit, what they were liking and what was not landing so well. And also for ourselves, when in many ways we're writing songs that we would like if we were audience members. And so if we're on stage and we're playing a song and we're like, wow, this has been going on for a while, huh? Then we know we need to cut some stuff down.
Yeah. How about Closer, the next track?
Closer was a song that went through a couple sort of iterations as well, and actually wound up. It was a part of like another song that had more things going on, and like I was just saying, you go through these revision processes, and eventually, I think we kind of just went, well, this is the best part of that song, so let's just have that be the song, and that kind of revision process is one of the things that makes creating the album so fun. Uh, the I love the drum groove on that song. That's
Mhm.
always, we can't do this obviously because of what I was just saying, but whenever Julian starts playing that drum groove live, I want to like pretend that I need to get a drink of water so I can just make him do it for 15 more seconds. But yeah, that was another one that kind of, I was recording bass parts for that song before it was the song that it is.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now for you, I'm sure that you've listened to the album many times. What tracks
Yeah,
do you as a listener, what tracks do you gravitate to?
uh, it's a little hard to separate the experience of being a part of creating the songs from the experience of listening to them. So normally my go-to here is New York Tramp, just because being a part of the creation of that song was so fun. I think that if I didn't know the band and I was just putting on the album for the first time, there's something about the plan
Mhm.
that really catches me. Which is funny because I think it's the most atypical of our songs on the album,
Mhm.
but I just find the place that song ended up to be such a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned some of the, uh, other projects that you've done, the Lennon,
Yeah,
Brian Wilson. Let's talk about those projects, including the new one that you're on, the Ray Davies.
yes, indeed. So when I joined the band in the spring of 2020, Marty Scott, the founder of Gem Records, which is the label that we're on, had this very cool idea, which was that year was the year that would be John Lennon's 80th birthday and the 40th anniversary of his passing. And so he had this great idea of, let's get all the bands on the Gem Records label, or as many bands as were able to do it under the circumstances, to record versions of songs written by John Lennon and celebrate his music and sort of this anniversary moment. And so that project became Gem Records Celebrates John Lennon. And it was so much fun that we wound up doing another one the next year, which was Gem Records Celebrates Brian Wilson. And then the next year, Gem Records celebrates Pete Townsend. And now this year, coming out August 11th, I have to say, available everywhere August 11th, or I get in trouble with Marty, will be Gem Records celebrates Ray Davies. And this is a really exciting one for us, because this is sort of the first one where we really got to figure the song out together and collaboratively create it and then go make it. Because the first, the John Lennon and the Brian Wilson ones were recorded remotely during quarantine. And then the Pete Townsend one, we recorded in the middle of recording Rattled Humming Heart. So we weren't able to spend as much time collaboratively on it as I think we would have necessarily liked to. So this Ray Davies one, we do Come Dancing, which I believe is the first track on the record. And it was a real pleasure to put that together and then go in the studio and make that happen. And our drummer Julian shot and edited a really cool video for it that I hope people will like as well. So that's coming out August 11th, and you can hear most of the tracks from them on Chris Carter's radio show on Underground Garage.
Very nice. Now, we're just out of curiosity, of the Kinks catalog, was Come Dancing one of the songs that you had gravitated to growing up?
It was not. I'm not sure I even had really. I'm sure I'd heard the song at some point, but when I got a text message that said, "I think we should do Come Dancing," and I thought, "Come Dancing," and I looked up the song and I listened to it and I thought, "Come Dancing," and then I got to rehearsal and. I think it was Martin was the one who said, okay, so here's kind of what I'm envisioning, and put us sort of through our paces with it a little bit. And I thought, Come Dancing. It was a really cool, we really try. My line about this is the album is Gem Records celebrates Ray Davies, not Gem Records imitates Ray Davies. We really tried to do things a little bit differently than they were done on the original recordings, because otherwise, just go listen to the original recordings. We're trying to avoid sort of the I can do that too sound. So the place that Come Dancing ended up, if you've listened to the original song, I think is going to be a really interesting surprise. And I think people who like the original song, but also like sort of more traditional, especially 70s-ish power pop and classic rock, are going to have a great time with that track.
Yeah, well, I often say on this show, when it comes to covers, if you can't bring something new to it, why bother?
Yeah, it just kind of is part of being, I think, a musical artist who's doing rock and roll and power pop now. Is these genres have been around for a long time. If you want to keep making music in that space, you need to be offering people something new. It can't just be the same thing for 60, 70 years. It has to be something new that still gives you the feeling of all that old stuff.
Exactly. And let's face it, music is about emotion.
Yeah, it's almost all emotion. It's emotion, and right, sound is just wiggly air. It's just air molecules vibrating. So the thing that makes it special is how you feel about it.
Exactly. I'll tell you, Marley, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that we do before we wrap this one up?
Sure. So, like I said, we field test a lot of the new songs live. So you can hear all the Rattled Humming Heart stuff anywhere you like. You can get it on Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, all those things. We do have some songs that are already in the field testing process for album number 4. Or 3. Oh my goodness, 4. Album number 3, maybe 4 if they don't make it onto 3 for whatever reason. But for album number 3, if you want to check out some of those songs, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can come see us live. We've got a few shows coming up. We're going to be at the Parkside Lounge in New York City on Friday, August 25th. We'll be at Cisco Brewery in New Bedford, Massachusetts on Sunday, the 27th of August. And then Saturday, September 2nd, we are at the Roscoe Beer Company. If you come see us in Roscoe, make sure to take a screenshot of your GPS when you're 41 miles from Roscoe and tag us in it. We love that joke. And then on September 30th, we're at the Big E, which is the Eastern States Exposition in West Springfield, Massachusetts. So you can come check us out there. And if you want any of the updates, all this stuff is available if you follow us on Instagram. I see scrolling across the bottom there, at the Midnight Callers on Instagram. That's kind of the home for everything Midnight Callers related. So you can check everything out there. And we hope you'll like what you see and stick around and want to check out some of the other stuff we've got coming down the line.
All right, good deal, Marley. So,
well, as I promised, Michael, I want to say it was a real pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And on that note, we'll bring this one to a close. Marley, thanks for being here. Everybody, thanks for watching. Have a good night.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.